Don Zoldi here, your co-host for Your Full Crew.
Hey, and I'm Mike Peel. I'm your other co host. We've got some great topics today. We're going to be talking about Amazon's workforce kind of woes. Are they purchasing a company to ramp up their replacements, or are they just adding some robotics to their normal logistics? We're going to be talking about some cool 5G stuff as the battle rages on for the spectrum. We're going to be talking about the use of Kinetics in counter UAS technology. There seems to be a need on the battlefield as this technology progresses to find new solutions to take out drones. And then also, finally, we're going to be talking about 5G and airspace. Creating a safe environment for traditional aviation while these new communication networks grow. So, lots of 5G, robots as usual, and some counter drone stuff. We've got some great guests to talk about these subjects today. We've got Taylor Albrecht. Taylor, you want to tell them a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely, and thanks for having me. Taylor Albrecht. I'm actually president of Mountain West UAS, which is a 501c3 nonprofit located in beautiful Buena Vista, Colorado. And we're actually having a conference at this time talking about beyond visual line of sight operations. So rocking it out here in the Rocky Mountain West.
Awesome. Thank you, Taylor. And we also have David Michelson. David, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me on today's podcast. I appreciate it. So I'm David. I'm the project manager for Blue UAS at the Defense Innovation Unit. We're part of the DoD that works hard to bring commercial technology into the hands of warfighters to help enhance their missions. And Blue UAS and small drones are a big part of that. So happy to be here and talk about what we're doing at Blue and really to say what's on my mind. So thanks.
Great to have you. And actually, we're going to be talking about Taylor's article first. So, IATA urges governments to work with aviation for safe 5G rollout. What about this interested you, and why do you want to talk about it today?
Well, a whole bunch of different reasons. It's the International Aviation Transport Association that's talking about this. There's been a lot of consternation, and particularly in the U.S., that this 5G rollout is using a radio spectrum that is very close to radar signals, and that is causing them to want to delay this rollout near airports where it could interfere with instrument approaches in that, of course, need to be very safely deployed. So interested from an aviation standpoint, but I'm also interested, there are a couple other things about it. First, 5G rollout and the Internet of Things and all of the things getting connected, and autonomous driving vehicles and the use of it maybe for urban air mobility, all are quite intriguing, and how this might get rolled out. But what are the unknowns that are causing risk to the airspace or to the people on the ground? So, and also, just how do you deploy this with all that, all of the different items that are going to be linked together? I live in a rural area of Colorado, so we probably aren't going to see 5G for many years. But when I go to Denver or Colorado Springs, what am I going to encounter there? So that's what was interesting me. It really a safety issue.
Yeah, it certainly, it seems like 5G is more contentious than all the other Gs that preceded it, or maybe that's just because I'm learning more about it as time goes on. Taylor, actually, David, what's your take on the 5G wars or the spectrum battles?
I think there's a lot to still be figured out there. I think a lot of vendors that make small drones especially are waiting to kind of see what standards are out there, what innovations come about it, and where people really put kind of a foothold on things. I think also like a big challenge is the swap constraints. Is if you're going to integrate new hardware onto a lot of systems that are out there for different networks, how is that going to impact the vendor too? And with supply chain issues and everything else that can kind of snowball into this, I think there's a lot still to be kind of figured out about how people are going to implement this.
Yeah, I was going to jump in and being military, former military myself, David, you use the term there. I'm going to just define it. The acronym SWAP, size, weight, and power. That's a significant issue, right? As you integrate new technologies onto, especially onto smaller drones. But back to Taylor's point, this 5G rollout has been contentious from the get-go. If you guys all recall, it was what I think December was supposed to be a big rollout. I believe it was T-Mobile and Verizon, and the FAA threw the red card down, and it was just like, what is happening? Because the FAA was like, hold on a minute, this is gonna interfere with significant, safety. Is it called, Taylor? Safety of life, or the instrumentation, like you said, for IFR, instrumental flight rules. And so then there was a pushback, literally a pushback of the timeline. And I think ultimately some of this was rolled out in January, well off schedule. But even so, the FAA was still putting out warnings to people, to pilots, like, hey, like, if you're in this area, your instruments might not actually work. And here we have now IATA coming on board. It's like September, and we're still talking about this. And my thinking is, why have we not figured this out yet? Why are the agencies not working more closely together on these things? When we're talking about safety of life and critical instrumentation, and so, it's just kind of mind-boggling that we're still having this conversation today, even though some of this technology has already been deployed. I don't really know what the workarounds are, because I don't know, Taylor, I'd ask you, have you heard of any actual incidents that have occurred around where 5G has been deployed, with pilots, given this potential interference with the spectrum?
No, I haven't. And the word that was escaping me when I first was talking is it's radar altimeters, and some of that stuff is 50s, 60s, 70s technology in the aircraft, and their function is to give you terrain awareness, height above ground level, and especially during instrument approaches. And so I was seeing that they had some of the, like Verizon or T-Mobile, delay deployment around large airports, but I haven't heard any issues with safety. But I can't imagine that the FAA is doing something without having had some experimentation on where that is. My other understanding about the spectrum is that it may interfere with GPS in some manner or form. So lots of things to consider.
Yeah,
I said all
teasing
the
that later.
Yeah, we are. All the acronyms are flooding back, right? It's TAWS, the system you're talking, the terrain awareness system, and then it's HAWS, I think, also for the helicopters, because I know HAI, the helicopter, the big Helicopter Association International, was also, kind of up in arms of, hey, this is a pretty big deal, especially in a place, Taylor, like where we are right now. By the way, I'm with Taylor in beautiful Buena Vista, Colorado, at Mount Princeton Hot Springs for the 10th UAS Roundup, and there we are literally at the base of, Mount Princeton, one of the many 14ers here in Colorado, and if you're flying around here, you need your TAWS. So very significant issues that need to be resolved.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised, you were saying, Don, that this hasn't been worked out, whether it's from, lack of communication between interagency players, or maybe in the past the kind of private market players had worked out all the details themselves, between them and the regulators. But if I was going to guess what an issue with 5G would have been, it would have been the complexity of the system, because it's not a dumb pipe like traditional systems. There's more kind of a smart mechanism for how things are passed off. But am I like misunderstanding this? Is this like an issue with the actual spectrum band that it's operating on that's causing these issues? The
Yes.
kind of
Yes, it is. And so, look, everybody, we had Jennifer Richter on here. She's a partner at Aiken Gump, Strauss, Hauenfeld, if I'm saying that correctly, leader of their emerging technologies practice, preeminent lawyer in this field. Spectrum is one of those high demand, low density, that's what we call it in the military, right, David? HDLD, high demand, low density assets. There's only so much spectrum to go around. And so what you're finding is, whether it's 5G in this case, and we're going to talk about Ligado here in a minute, with this limited asset, it's starting to get crowded. And these the pipes, as you call them, Mike, they're bumping up against each other, and that's where there's this potential for interference that people haven't quite thought through. How do you deal with that? Now, I believe there are sometimes filters, like radio filters or other workarounds, other technological workarounds, but these are presumably very expensive. Like, nobody even knows, right, how much something like that would cost to deploy. And then you've got the swap issue that David mentioned earlier. The more equipment you throw on to small things like drones, or even bigger things like helicopters, the more weight you're adding. So, and money to the process.
Yeah, it sounds like we're adding a burden here, because traditionally these things were not operating on this frequency band at all, right? This was a completely separate band. But there's also other issues that arise from that, and I think we're part of the slow rollout, which doesn't cover as much distance on this frequency either, right? So we got a comment from
Absolutely.
Dan Julin. He's saying, "Good morning, all. What is the likelihood of moving to licensed bands for the larger DoD Group 2 and 3 UAS in the near future?" Thank you, Dan, for the comment. And actually, if you're out there, anybody who's also enjoying it and is willing to comment, please do. And like and subscribe on YouTube. Hit that notification bell and set notifications to on so you never miss a great answer like our guests are going to give right now. So who wants to take it?
So the question, I don't know if David wants to take that. The question, and this is an FCC question, right? Because now we're talking about licensure of spectrum. And like I said, there's only so much to go around. So David, there has been talk of having allocated spectrum for UAS, but I don't know that that's going anywhere. Have you heard anything different around the Beltway?
No, I haven't heard anything, Don. I know that's such a big issue for the FCC and the Department of Defense. Those are deep, big negotiations that, we'll have to see how time kind of plays out for it. But I don't have any big insights on that.
Yeah, so Dan, thanks for your comment. We appreciate you. By the way, Dan is with Arium Analytics up there in Canada. They're the creators of the designers and producers of the Robird. It's an ornithopter. It's a peregrine falcon. It's super cool. It's a drone that looks like a falcon. So very cool stuff. Mike, I don't know if you want to transition to the next one, because I think it's probably a perfect time to do that, because we're talking about interference. And so this article I picked out of Breaking Defense. This news actually broke last week. If anybody's been following this, there's a group called Ligado. There's a long sordid history here dating back, more than 10 plus years with this group. They were originally Light Squared, and it's all about licensure and spectrum and potential GPS interference with their mobile satellite stations, terrestrial. So what they have is a bunch of satellites, right? They're going to be beaming down, and that's a technical term, right? Beaming down. information for 5G. They have all these this plan for deploying terrestrial and mobile satellite stations across the country. And in 2020, the FCC, again, it's a very long process we're talking about here. A lot of testing went behind the scenes. The Department of Transportation, every federal agency, almost every aviation agency you can possibly think of, and anything in the ecosystem, objected to the FCC granting Ligado an amended license in, I believe it's like the 5.something megahertz band. Again, it's adjacent to critical bands for the DoD and other federal agencies on the spectrum. They said it would interfere with GPS in particular. And, look, let's talk about GPS for a second. GPS powers society. I mean, this is not just, we're not talking about DoD drones. We're not just talking about, commercial aircraft. We're talking about everything you do every single day, including when you get in your car and you put on Waze to get to a place like Mount Princeton Hot Springs, which is exactly what I did yesterday. That's what GPS is so pervasive in society. Like, I don't know how we'd function without it. And what everybody's saying is that Ligado's network, their system is going to interfere with GPS. And so what happened was, the word got back to Congress because I'm going to say it was May of 2020, the FCC granted that license. Immediately, NTIA, which is the National Telecommunications and Information Agency, NTIA represents virtually all the federal agencies when it comes to spectrum, filed a petition for stay, meaning to hold off on implementing this, and for reconsideration, meaning, hey, FCC, you need to relook at this seriously. And that petition for reconsideration still, to this day, is pending, more than 2 years later. But what they did was, in January of this year, they denied the stay. And I think it was this year. I might be squishy on my timelines. So Ligado has been pressing on, right? They've been doing their required quarterly reports that, by the way, are on the FCC's website. You can go check them out for yourself. And I've been reporting on this extensively for Inside GNSS magazine. But what happened was Congress got energized in the last National Defense Authorization Act. They threw down their own red card and they said, DoD, you will not spend a dime of our money on any kind of receivers, filters, to fix what is going to happen because of Ligado. And they also required the national is it the Science Academies?
NAS.
Somebody help me here. What is it? NAS, the National Academy of Sciences. So this is like 3 different organizations actually, and they required the NAS to do their own independent study. Because, right, you've got Ligado pushing out their studies, you've got the DoD, Department of Transportation, everybody else pushing out their studies, and Congress said, you know what? We're getting a neutral objective party to look at all this, and they had hearings all throughout last year. You can go on the NAS website, there's recordings you can listen to, there's reports you can look at, but the big news that broke out last week was NAS finalized their report and published it, and they said, guess what, everybody? Houston, we have a problem. Hello? And so now what? Like that, seriously, that is the question. So what are we going to do about it? What is the FCC going to do about this Ligado license they granted over 2 years ago? They have still not acted on the petition for reconsideration. And now what is Congress going to do as they're looking to maybe do the next Defense Authorization Act? So interesting times indeed. The NAS study has validated some of these concerns, and in particular for the DoD. So I would love to hear David's thoughts on this first.
Well, Don, I would ask you the question. I think you got a great background for the legality portion of this and understanding, like, where can this go? What might happen going forward? This is a huge legal battle. It sounds like, you did outline, hey, Congress could take action, and others can dive in, but what do you see happening?
Yeah, who's at fault and how are they accountable?
This is a interesting question, right? Because this is a administrative action by a federal agency, and so, at some point, if the agency fails to act, and we know now that there's actually a safety concern, usually you have to exhaust what they call exhaust all administrative remedies before you can actually take this to court. But that honestly, I think could be the next step, is maybe there's a lawsuit filed to say, and I can imagine the parties, right? I mean, so, and federal agencies would be represented by not only NTIA, but in a lawsuit, usually by the Department of Justice, to say, hey, this needs to stop. We need an answer here. We can't just keep waiting on and on and on. So, we need closure. So I would love to hear Jennifer Richter's thoughts on this. She's out there. Maybe we can pick her brain. And spoiler alert, I'm writing another article on this for Inside GNSS. So I'm definitely going to be ringing up Jennifer. So stay tuned for that article, David. I will get an answer to that question, because I think that is now the one that is on everyone's mind. So, okay, great. The report is out there. We can all talk about the report all day long. The relevant question is, what now? What's next? And that's the question that I'm going to need to sink my teeth into at the end of this week when I finally get home, to look at that and push out another article.
So maybe another question to David is, how unusual is this? Is this it seems unusual to me.
I think, anytime a new technology or someone tries to get into a space that the DoD has an interest in, things like this can happen. But I think that, it's going to get worked out. Dawn will probably provide some great insights, it sounds like, on where this can go in her article coming up. But I think that, the department, the report, the article said that any impacts on the DoD are classified. So we don't know the exact impacts. You can make guesses. Anyone can. But I think that, whatever happens, the DoD will probably be just fine.
What do you think, Taylor?
If I jump in, it really occurred to me something very interesting. So I'm aware from the manned aviation side where Ligado and the interference with GPS in aviation, and it was huge. And like you said, Don, all of the alphabet soup aviation organizations were vehemently against it, and it was crazy. And what I think we're seeing here in both instances on 5G and this is that the FCC is granting licensure to bits of the radio spectrum that are really close to other bits of the radio spectrum that are being used. And what occurred to me was this is almost a reversal of what normally happens, and that is, that it's the technology that isn't quite caught up to what the FCC wants to do. And what I mean by that is that you've got old GPS receiver and transmitter deployments, and they spill over the band. And so the technology isn't there to keep it within what the FCC is granting, which is a little bit different than what we see from most federal agencies. So I think that's going to be a huge battle. And also to your point, Don, GPS, we are so reliant on it for everything. In fact, David, it scares me, as being a point of weakness. I don't know if you guys watch, but it's interesting out here in the West, we get NOTAMs issued by the FAA for GPS interference, and they're doing it a lot down in New Mexico. And the NOTAM covers 50 feet above the ground, covers almost a 250-mile radius, where I guess they're testing GPS jamming devices in that. But that kind of scares me, because if we have a weakness in our GPS, or so much in life, our computer coughs. Anyway, that's kind of what I had to say on it.
I think
Yeah.
that's a really great insight into it's actually the reverse of what we normally see in terms of federal institutions, regulators, etc. But Don, correct me if I'm wrong. Like there is a problem, but the problem seemed to be specific to this military vendor, and that actually commercial products were a little bit more rugged. Is that something that
I don't
what the
know.
Defense
I'm gonna,
Innovation
I'm
Unit
gonna,
is actually solving? Like their entire purpose is actually making that less of a thing.
no, I'm gonna say absolutely no,
Okay.
because I've interviewed people like, oh gosh, name Diana. It's Van Van Buren. Um, my brain is not working, and no, Von oh Diana von Forchgott, I believe, and she was very high up in the Department of Transportation under the Trump administration, and she writes for Forbes now. And I mean, if you listen to her, I mean, she's like literally, I don't want to say Chicken Little, because that was, well, actually, the Disney movie, the sky really was falling. But she's just like, like reality will cease to exist as we know it if Ligado prevails here. And we're talking emergency vehicles won't know where to find people that are dying. Or fire trucks won't know where to go to find the fire. I mean, like, this is the kind of stuff. So no, I agree with Taylor. This is every alphabet soup you can think of. And by the way, it's not just the feds and like even civilian, like what you would think of as advocacy organizations. It's universities. Universities are saying, holy shnikes, like we've got, this agricultural research or whatever that we're doing, and this is absolutely going to affect that. So there's all kinds of groups of people like up in arms about this. And this article might be specifically about the DoD because frankly it was from Breaking Defense. But this is a much more pervasive and concerning issue across the board.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break to thank our sponsors. We're very happy to have Elsight, Dragonfly, Promo Drone, who's the latest one, and who am I forgetting?
Well, they should be flipping up here soon. There's Vodics. Vodics, drone registration.
Sorry.
Our buddies from Miami. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you again to our sponsors for supporting this podcast and the Full Tilt. We appreciate everything you do for us. And again, I'm just going to remind you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit the like button, and mash that notification bell. That'll help make sure that you never miss an episode. So, coming up on number 3, we've got
hey, Mike,
David. Yes.
Do we have a couple things in the chat also? I think I saw like maybe some people piping up.
No.
Okay, roger that.
So we've got David's article. Army must start leaning on kinetic options for counter drone as autonomous UAS proliferate. And this is actually kind of following up one that Dawn brought up. I think it was 2 weeks ago about the Vampire system from L3 Harris. So it seems like kinetic options are going to be necessary. David, you want to take a little bit more of a deep dive and why you brought this article up?
Yeah, and I think this kind of piggybacks on some other conversations we've had today with communications and GPS capabilities, but we're just seeing industry get better and better at developing autonomous capabilities for their systems, especially like Taylor mentioned, looking at beyond visual line of sight operations for drones. You have to do a lot of that on autonomous mission planning. So I think this actually doesn't just apply to the Army, but I think that when you look at this from a public safety perspective too, I think you have to think about how the market's going to adapt and how the Department of Defense is also going to adapt to defending against drones. Look at anything that's happening in Ukraine right now and how many drones are flying around out there, both on the Ukrainian side as well as on the Russian side. And it's obvious that something has to be done. These systems are flying all over the place. They're wreaking havoc on both sides, and there's got to be some way to stop them. And if you have a system that's flying autonomously, it's not emitting any RF signals, it's not in comms with the controller, if it's just on its mission, there's really only one way to take it down, and that's to take it out of the sky. and we're not going to have a ton of people out there training Falcons, which is a thing, to take these down, but you're going to have to come up with other ways. And having a kinetic option to just remove it from the equation is probably going to become more and more prevalent. And I think you're going to have to see that too, whether that drone that's flying against the Ukrainians or the Russians or whoever is lethal on its own, or if it's just collecting intelligence, they're going to want to remove it. So that's why I wanted to really bring this up, because I think there's a lot out there still that's got to get developed. And we've even seen systems like these lethal ones in South America attempt to take the lives of elected leaders down there.
Yes.
So there's a lot. It's not just in Ukraine right now, but it's starting to get more and more pervasive, and it's only a matter of time, I think, until these things show up in a lot of places that we really don't want to see them. And so those are my opinions, and I should have said this up front, but these are all my opinions. I'm not representing the department in any way or Defense Innovation Unit, but there's a lot of applicability into the work I do, and I feel strongly about this. So that's why I wanted to bring this one up and share it.
Hey, Mike, can I ask David a question about DIU?
Sure, of course you can. You don't need my permission.
So Mike, so David, in the context of DIU, and you said bringing commercial technologies into the DoD, when you think of the Blue UAS program, people think of hardware, and obviously you have your framework, right, that deals with software, folks like Modal AI and their autopilot. But is counter UAS in the realm of possibility? Some of these companies that are out there to kind of come on board through DIU as part of the Blue program?
There's definitely opportunities out there, and this is something that DIU's worked on in the past, and it's been rolled up in a lot of different ways. But all of the vendors out there, not just the Blue vendors, should really be thinking about their systems too, and how counter UAS applies to them, how they can participate as well. Because it's not just that, hey, there's someone that shouldn't be flying a drone. This could be as simple as, I'm sitting in Reagan National Airport waiting to take off, but someone is flying a drone over the runway. And so it shuts the whole place down. I'm delayed for hours. I think a lot of us have been there. It sucks. That's not because a vendor made a system that is malicious, but someone is doing something they're not supposed to. And if, an airport could just remove that drone from the equation, hundreds or thousands of flyers are going to be much, much happier and safer that they can take off on time, as opposed to waiting for something to get taken out. So I think a lot of vendors really got to think about it. And I know that's why remote ID was brought up. It's just, there's a lot to it that needs to be thought about with counter UAS. And DIU's been a player in this space for a while now. We look forward to contributing more in the future.
Yeah, we got a comment
Taylor,
from the chat that I think
go ahead.
will provide some context for further conversation. It's from Thomas Adams on LinkedIn. Thank you for sending it in. It will be important to have a variety of options available to mitigate drones. Public safety-wise, kinetic options carry risks to the public we are trying to protect, so there may be different use requirements to manage risk. I guess one of the big issues, though, is if this drone is completely shielded and truly running BVLOS, how do you mitigate it without a kinetic option? So it might even be that even on the civilian side, kinetic options will be necessary. They just won't be missiles, right? They'll be something like...
I can see downtown Denver. Pew, pew, pew. So Taylor, what do you think?
Boy, again, I'm getting all these thoughts and things that are occurring to me, and the one is, we're looking at the industry side of unmanned systems operations, and I know just through reading, the counter drone thing is billions and billions of dollars industry, and it's growing along with just the regular industry, and for good reason. But when I think of counter drone technology, I'm more thinking along the lines of the major airports like DIA, or, and David, I'm sure you can speak to this, we have a little medium security prison in the town of Buena Vista, and we get drone drops of contraband in there. And so I know there are companies working on counter drone in sort of that space, and maybe the commenter about public safety. I don't know. It's a whole big, wide avenue of how do you deal with the technology at its level. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and who has the authority to actually take a drone down, as we've...
Absolutely.
And I want to comment on what Mike just said. You know, I think that's really significant. So the technology's out there. Taylor, you're absolutely right. It's going to be a multi-billion-dollar market. I'm sure it's already a multi-million-dollar market for good reason. You know, and the Preventing Emerging Threats Act, which enables, you know, again, there's only a handful of federal agencies that have this authority. DoD, when I say this, meaning counter, not only to detect, but to mitigate the drones. DoD had the first authority out of the gate from Congress, 10 U.S.C. 130I. Why do they need congressional authority? Because there's a whole raft of statutes, everything from the Aircraft Sabotage Act to the Pen Register Act to the wiretap statute that apply to the majority of these technologies, right? So if you're doing any of these actions, you're violating some federal law that's criminal. That's why DoD got 10 U.S.C. 130I. Now, the Preventing Emerging Threats Act, I believe, was put into I think it was the 2018 FAA Reauthorization Act. It is sunsetting like in days. What does that mean? That it wasn't an authority for all time. It had a time window on it. That time window is expiring, and the FBI, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, United States Coast Guard, by the way, because they don't fall under the DoD, they fall under DHS. Their authority is expiring to mitigate drones. That's a problem, everybody, and Congress is aware of it. Everybody's been yammering about this. The FAA Reauthorization Act is coming up, but man, we need action soon. And not
When did
only
that act come into law, Don? The
I
emerging
think,
threats?
like I said, I think it came in the 2018 FAA Reauthorization Act.
Okay.
But that particular section of it had a sunset clause, meaning it was like a 2-year authority or a multi-year authority. So what is it, 2022, doing public math, 4-year authority. And so...
But what was the intent of that limitation? You know, like...
Because they wanted to see how it worked.
Oh.
How goes it? So like the DOJ had reporting requirements, things like this. And so there was a big hearing in the Senate Homeland Security Committee back in June. By the way, everybody, you can check that out. It is available online. It was a great hearing where all these agencies, it was the FAA, because they had kind of the airport angle of this, right? Things that Taylor and David are both talking about, concerns about being able to mitigate things at airports. Mm-hmm. You had the DOJ, which also represents the FBI, and then the Department of Homeland Security, because Border Patrol and Coast Guard are all under them, right? So they were like, we need this authority. By the way, they want to expand it. So here's what they proposed. And there has been a senator that put this forward. I don't know where it is in the docket, what the timeline is, but that is also in another article I'll be writing. This one for Inside Unmanned Systems magazine. So they proposed that the state, local, tribal, territorial, governmental, public agencies, and some private critical infrastructure companies have the outright ability to detect drones. That's the first thing. Then they also proposed that 12 a year have the ability on a pilot program working with the DOJ and DHS at some training facility to mitigate. So they would onboard like 12 agencies a year to also be able to take them down. So what does that tell you, everybody? That tells you technically, in the eyes of major federal agencies and Congress, they don't even think people have the ability legally to detect drones, and certainly not to mitigate them. We should all be very frightened.
Yeah, this has been kind of something going on for a long time. As long as I've been kind of tracking it, it seems like even when the FAA was talking about a need for safety, the rules that would actually create safe skies were coming so slow. It was like are we just saying that, or do we care about it? This authority issue kind of falls into the same thing like that for me, where I'm asking, like, if we're really, really concerned about safety, we need to kind of figure out where these lines are drawn, and that's almost more important to give temporary status or authority to do something, because otherwise we could have quite an incident and nobody's able to actually mitigate it. I just want to bring up some questions. We got to move along. We have LinkedIn user, Zev Nadler. Just so you know, I can only see on my phone if your privacy settings are set a certain way. So we were actually able to see Zev here. A quasi-kinetic effect could be Fordham's net technology. There are also tractor beam tech for mitigation as offered by companies like Defend, who we know actually pretty well. They were on Donner Drones, and they're Inforce Air. Thomas Adams also said time is ticking. I guess he's talking about this act. And October 2018, he was giving us the precise month that it went into effect. And also back from Zev, also DO corrections. Anybody know what that's in reference to?
Yeah, what he's talking about. By the way, I met Zev in human form last week at Commercial UAV in Las Vegas. That was so awesome. I don't know where that picture went, Zev, that you took of us together, but maybe post it soon. He's talking about Department of Corrections and some of the things Taylor mentioned, people dropping contraband into prisons, into local jails, and technically none of them have this authority to either detect or to mitigate, and that's a big problem.
Yeah, well, actually, so dropping things into jail, but they're also doing surveillance to help in escapes, right? So, that's one that doesn't get brought up as much. I guess it's less of a headline grabber because nobody's successfully used it, but that we know of.
Hey, Mike, can I say one more thing before we transition to your robot article?
Sure.
We were at Commercial UAV last week, and I moderated a panel with Ramon Roche from the Drone Code Foundation and David Benowitz, the drone analyst, about, drone market trends. And something came up about not only cybersecurity, but physical security. And what I found really interesting, the show was amazing, by the way, 4,000 people, an unprecedented number of vendors.
Yeah, go back and listen to our broadcast. We had quite a few there.
We did, yeah, you should absolutely check that out. But number one thing I noticed was not one single counter drone company there. And I feel like, the drone crowd, they might look at counter drone as being counter them, but they're not. It's it's an enabling technology that's going to actually bolster sustainable, reliable, and repeatable drone operations, especially beyond visual line of sight, which is our theme for Taylor's conference right now, BVLOS. So, everybody, I'll say is embrace counter drone technology, because without it, you're not going to be able to do what you want to do.
So I will give some perspective as a former showrunner on why there might not have been counter drone technology. So we had gotten 2 vendors in the last year that InterDrone ran, but it was actually increasingly hard to even get them on the line because their customers are actually very, very different. So if a trade show is running mostly on the program like InterDrone was, it was a little bit less on the expo hall side. It was more likely we could get a counter drone person in because they could engage with an audience on a philosophical discussion. But in terms of a more trade show formatted event, it's much harder to get those in because they're looking and they're saying, hey, my customer's not there, why would I spend the time? So I think that might be it if we're going to give cUAV the benefit of the doubt. But honestly, if you are a cUAS company, go to these shows. Offer up a session because this is a negotiation that we have to have between these two technologies. It's not one versus the other. It's actually how do we create a sustainable ecosystem where we eliminate bad players together. So that's kind of my philosophical tip for the day. We're going to head on over to the last article. We're going to keep the theme on autonomous systems, but now we're going to go into the factory. And so Amazon is buying Klustermans. If you don't know that company, that's probably because it's an industrial company. So it's a mechatronic specialist in Belgium, and it's going to ramp up its robotic operations. So one thing that kind of shocked me when I saw this was, in my head, Amazon is one of the most roboticized warehouse environments that you can kind of think of, especially if you go back just a couple years. They've really advanced that to the point where, you know, staff has to negotiate the space with robots already that are moving around it. So the question becomes why. So this article kind of infers that there might be a worker shortage that's coming up. I will put that in the kind of sphere of wishful thinking because this is TechCrunch and they want to find the most, I guess, positive angle, so they keep getting interviews. And we've kind of seen that Pollyannish take from this publication before, and but I would say that this is just kind of the line that Amazon has been taking. It's a cost effectiveness to eliminate workers. And I think one of the things we don't talk about when we talk about autonomous systems is because sometimes we like to take the angle of there will be new jobs or there'll be different types of jobs. But the truth is, for workers, they might not be able to train into those different types of jobs. And I just want to say that that's actually not the goal of roboticizing a factory system or a warehouse system. The goal is to actually reduce costs and create consistency. And I don't think this is anywhere out of line of their normal strategy. But I'm curious to see what everybody else's take is, because you do work with autonomous systems. And, you know, how do you feel about headlines like this? Who wants to volunteer?
Who do you want to go to first?
I'm going to select Taylor.
Okay, I was going to volunteer, but
it's like in class, nobody's raising their hand.
There's no wrong answers.
In the back row. It's really interesting. I don't see any nefarious things like replacing staff. I think it's all in Amazon's long-term scheme of thing, and you know, a way to provide shareholders benefit. But what's interesting to me is that I'm sorry, I just lost that thought. Go to David and then I'll get it back and write it down.
The thing I like about automating or roboticizing things is that there's oftentimes a lot of unknown positive consequences. I mean, there's always the concern that you're going to lose people or you're going to replace people, but I think in a lot of cases too, you see where automating jobs actually brings in new jobs that you do need that you didn't anticipate in the first place. So I think there's a lot of exciting things that can come out of something like this. So yeah, it's very interesting to see this and to see how it's growing. Taylor, I hope you have your thought back.
I did, thank you. Yeah, and you know, it's kind of completely unrelated in a sense, but I kind of grew up in my career in the hospitality business, and we were always talking about leisure time. And what I love is kind of the oxymoron that came up, that computers were supposed to give us all kinds more leisure time. And I think that goes into robotics too. And I'm thinking, Michael and Don, do you have any more leisure time from your use of computers? Yeah. In fact, it's kind of gone the other direction.
No, I have to set it up. Like, I have to make sure I don't interrupt my leisure time on purpose. Like, and I have to slap myself and say, stop, don't look at the phone.
That's a great point, especially, you know, how many screens do we have now?
I'm looking at 6.
You know, 5, 6, yeah, 6 screens. So it's interesting, but I love the move on technology. And you know, when we're in the drone space, we're looking to make safety a big issue, and that's why they're so great for doing utility inspections and first responders throwing them into. We've actually had one of our members, a first responder, deploy into a structure and have looking for a fugitive, and the fugitive gave up to the drone. So how safe is that for the public safety officer? So I see this as a mere deployment of really good stuff that maybe does shift jobs into a different realm.
Yeah.
So I want to jump on something Mike said earlier, kind of this idea of, okay, so it might create new jobs, but who's training that workforce of tomorrow? And I think that is a significant issue we all need to start thinking about, and needs to start in elementary school. I mean, we've got incredible groups, at least in the phone space, I can rattle off like drone cadets. We're going to have Henze Gustav on soon on this crew in a couple weeks. Maybe it's next week. Honestly, it's all a blur. But, very, very important topic is this idea of who is growing that STEM workforce. We had Jasmine LaFleur from Greater Than Tech on the Donna drones recently, talking about how she's trying to inspire minority girls to get into STEM, not just drones, but all STEM career fields. And, I think that's something that we all need to take very seriously as we become more automated, as the rise of drones, advanced air mobility, robots. Where are those mechanics? Where are the engineers? Where are, virtually every career field, and those that we haven't even thought of. And oh, by the way, I'm going to take a second here to also plug this. I'm working with Sharon Rossmark, Women in Drones, Marlene Dials of the Diversity Development Network of Canada. We need a diverse workforce for tomorrow, not just, one group of people that might be able to afford in their affluent school to have drones in the classroom. We need them everywhere. We need everybody to be participating. And so I would ask you to please take our UAS AAM Industry Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Survey. You can find that on my website, P3 Tech Consulting, under Diversity. You can find it on the Women in Drones and the DDNC website as well. But we want to hear your voices because we want to help enable the industry workforce of tomorrow.
So, when you say workforce of tomorrow, Dawn, I think that's, if I could provide more nuance to kind of what I was saying earlier, is that I think we need to grapple with that there might not be as many traditional jobs. The way that we used to think of what work is has to be redefined in the face of this technology. And, it also, if you were a generation that had to work and toil hard, don't begrudge whatever the next generation of work is. As Taylor was saying, the mental exhaustion of devoting yourself to all these computers is real exhaustion. And it does actually have a biological cost. I don't have as much time to work out, so I have to put time aside. And, it's not totally equatable, but when you look at all the physical labor that people used to have, they were at much greater risk to physical harm. And I would also say it's pretty obvious that based on articles we've seen about Amazon, that some of these workers are in the face of harm, or at least are exhausted or overworked. There was the classic example of people going to the bathroom in bottles. So if we could eliminate what is terrible work, redefine work, and as long as we establish that work has value to each other, then I think we have a great setup for the future where we're eliminating a lot of toil that people shouldn't have to go through, and a lot of risks that people shouldn't have to go through.
I'm all for more bathroom breaks. I'm just throwing that out.
Yes. So before the final bathroom break, 3 minutes from now, any last comments from the chat on automation and what they think the future holds for the workforce?
And I would love to, as maybe people are thinking about that, maybe do a quick lightning round, David, then Taylor. David, do you have any quick announcements about DIU or anything people should be looking out for? How do they reach you?
Yeah, if you want to know more about DIU, go to diu.mil. For the Blue UAS effort, you can go to diu.mil/blue-UAS. And if you do want to reach out about our program, you can reach us at blueuas@diu.mil.
Thank you. How about you, Taylor?
Oh, yeah. There's not enough time. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. We started out as a group called Central Colorado UAS Club in 2017, but we've evolved, and we just rolled out yesterday a new corporate identity. We are now going to be known as Mountain West UAS. And our website is live, mountainwestuas.org. And our real initiatives are education-based and public outreach. We are a nonprofit organization and doing some fundraising efforts right now. But this UAS Roundup is the 10th one that this group has put on. And it's incredible. We've got a great lineup, including Don Zoldi. And David, I'm sorry you couldn't make it, darn it. But great to have you guys out here. We've got tremendous vendors. We've got tremendous sponsors. And it's going on right now, and I'm missing it. But I was really happy to be here. This is awesome.
We've got a question from the chat.
Real soon. Oh, go ahead, Mike. Go.
We've got a question from the chat, and we're short on time because you got to get back to the show. So this is for David. I was involved in DIU solicitation for a client that resulted in their having been down selected but not chosen in the end. So I know firsthand the value of Blue UAS. My question is why some states, Florida, already an early adopter, are looking at requiring blue listed drones for law enforcement who are currently using DJI for ISR, SAR, and DFR at 1/3 the cost of a typical Blue UAS. Since the D in DIU is for defense and not law enforcement, how do you and the DIU feel about the LE narrative being more about NDAA compliance so that more competitive pricing and tech could be made available to the LE? And I've heard this question multiple times at shows, so I want to hear the answer.
That is a big question, hard to answer, but the best thing I can say is you have to go back to the state of Florida. DIU works for the Department of Defense. We have no say in the matters of a state like Florida. So, I know the frustrations that are in that, and I hear your question, but honestly, you got to go back to the legislature there and talk to them and, come up with a solution that way.
Yep.
Yeah, it seems like some states just wanted to follow after that because it could be an easy stamp answer, but it's actually not based on what I've been hearing from law enforcement. And if there's some other way to comply, I'm sure some drone manufacturers would figure out a way to do that. All right, we're closing things up for the end of the episode. Dawn, you want to tell us what's coming up this week and next?
Oh boy, absolutely. So tomorrow on Full Crew Twitter Spaces, join us at 9 a.m. Mountain. We have Sean Pribble from the law firm of Holland and Knight. He is an expert in maritime law, and he is going to be accompanied with the incredible Randy Goers from the Drone Radio Show. So check us out tomorrow on Twitter Spaces. That link is out there on LinkedIn, and so join us there. And follow us, obviously, on Twitter and the Full Crew on Twitter. Wednesday, we have Rob Heber from Workhorse Group doing incredible last-mile delivery from their EV trucks with the Horsefly drone. And so they have this integrated system that is really unique. And Rob is going to be with us on the Dawn of Drones Wednesday at 9 a.m. Mountain. And then Thursday, we have the unbelievable Tawny Smith from Flying Lions. We're continuing market use cases on the Dawn of Drones and in that clubhouse. And she's going to talk about drone as first responder, a very important use case, and how Flying Lions plays into that. Mike, I know you have the tiles for our next week's guest on both the crew and the tilt. I'm
on
sorry,
the tilt, we have Jennifer Richter. I don't remember the guest for crew, but it's going to be coming up right here, so just mark it down with a pen or write a note to yourself on your favorite notepad app. So we're going to be heading out. Again, I just want to remind you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit the like button and the notification bell. There's a reason I say it all the time. It really helps us grow, and we've been seeing the growth, so we thank you for your support so far. You could also go to fullcrew.io and sign up for our newsletter. You'll never miss an episode if you do that. Thank you again to our guests, Taylor and David. Thank you again, Dawn, and thank you to everybody who asked questions today. It really just makes the episode that much better. And that's it for this week on The Full Crew. We are out here.